Hi, my name is James Orvis, and today we're going to look at how to create a techno rumble, which is very, very prominent in a lot of old and new techno music, especially with labels like Drumcode that pedal this sound quite heavily. And we're just going to start by showing you a quick example of what I'm talking about. So here's quite an old Drumcode track here, Rivington by Leighton Giordani. And also after this, I played this kind of little loop here. We're just going to flick through randomly, just set this to shuffle, and you'll hear that most of the tracks on Drumcode have this kind of low, ominous rumbling sound that grooves with the track. So let's just do that. Let's have a listen to this one, and I'll flick on to some others. So yeah, them last two as well, they were quite prominent in that example as well. So it's just that kind of like low rumble that sits in between the kick. And it's really, really important when making techno tracks to get this technique under your belt. It just really adds to the track. It really makes it quite dark and pins down that low end and makes it really grooving and rolling as well. And you can get some really, really interesting results when experimenting with this. So let's go ahead and get stuck in. And first of all, I'm just going to show you what we're working with. So I've set up a kick here, which is taken from the gradient pack, and we've got two fuse loops. And with the kick, I've just added a drum bus, decapitator, and a little bit of EQ as well, just to kind of make the kick sound a little bit more techno-y, basically, just to kind of make it a bit darker and crunchier. So let's play this little loop together, and you can hear what this sounds like. So what we're going to do today is we're going to create a rumble that will slot in with this loop and just add that bottom end and make it roll more. And so what I've done here is quite a simple technique where you just take any percussive loop, usually stuff that's like kind of got kind of mid to low elements in it, like toms and congas are really good for this. And also it's really good to use stuff that sounds organic as well, like real world kind of drums really work well. And it's because you get a lot of bend in the drum sound when people hit the skins and things like that. So what I've done is I've just taken this gradient loop here, and I'll just play this quickly. So the first technique is to pitch it down. Around there sits well for me, and then start to bring in the loop points and kind of just scroll around and see what works. Usually best to play this with the kick and maybe the percussion in as well. That area there could work pretty well. And once you've found somewhere that you like as well, you can always move this start point around. So yeah, you get the idea. And it doesn't sound great straight away, but what you do after that is you filter it down, so you're just working with the low end and not that top end that's popping through. So what I did earlier when I was playing around, I found a part of the loop which I really liked, and it kind of works well with this loop. And we'll just quickly go ahead and play this. So that works really well for me. I had a lot of groove already. And you'll notice here I added in some volume envelope automation, and this was just to kind of duck the sound when the kick hits. So it works well with the kick. It doesn't sound great now, but then what we're going to do is, like I said, we're going to use the EQ. And what I've done here is shaved off some of the bottom end, shaved off the top end, and you're left with this. So it's working really well already, now we've done that. And also what I wanted to do was bring up this 270 Hertz area. So that was just to balance the sound a little bit more, and also I felt like the 200 Hertz area kind of give it a little bit more grit and pop through the mix a little bit better. So now we've got our basic kind of rumble sound, we're going to go ahead and start processing it. So the first thing I wanted to do was to add a little bit more grit and interest in the sound. And this is something that I do quite often when designing sounds, which you've probably seen in other tutorials as well, which is to use plugins like Native Instruments Guitar Rig. And it's a really, really great way to experiment and really warp the sound and get different textures, and then you can layer it back up with the original sound. So what I did was flick through a few different presets and play around with the modules and stuff, and I ended up with this. So I really like that's really crunchy, and it's got like this weird rolling tone going on in there as well. Next thing I wanted to do was to just kind of sculpt that again. So I've taken off the bottom end and the top end, and I've ended up with this. And lastly, we've got the compressor, and I've set this to sidechain, so it sidechains with the kick. So that's now really, really rolling nicely and bouncing with the kick. And then the next thing to do is to unsolo it and start to bring in that extra layer and match it up with the original sound so you get a nice balance. So that works really, really well for me. So now we've sculpted the sound a little bit more and added a bit more grit and interest. We're going to go ahead and start to add a plate reverb. And the reason why I did this was that I felt like I really liked the sound, but it wasn't kind of drawn out long enough for me. I wanted it to have like a bit more decay on the transients. Like, it's really, really good the way it works, but I just felt like it would work better if it was more smeared. Not too much, because then it'll just drown the sound out in the low end and it won't have the same kind of groove. So what I did was I used 2 channels. So we've got a clean channel and then we've got a wet channel with the plate on, and I used Lustrous Plate, and it sounds like this on full wet. So it really smears the sound, adds like a nice kind of metallic texture to it as well. And we opened up the width a little bit and also added a bit of pre-delay as well. And the next thing that I wanted to do was to again sculpt this sound. And what I found was that I just wanted to use kind of the 200 Hertz area. So what we're going to do now is just kind of A/B it so you can hear what the plate is adding to the sound. It's very subtle, but just listen out for the kind of smearing in the background of the sound. It just makes it a little bit mushier. Just adds a little bit more depth as well, I think, and a bit more width, considering we turned up the stereo width on the reverb as well. So next I wanted to add a little bit of compression just to give the sound a little bit more power, even out the transients a little bit. So I just added the FG401 by Slate, and it sounds like this. So that's evened out the sound a little bit more. I felt like it wasn't enough, so I wanted to go a little bit more extreme, and we've added in a limiter. So this is kind of crushing the sound a fair bit, but because we're making techno and we're not using traditional techniques like in studio, this is a no-no, but we're making techno, we can experiment a bit, and I feel like using a limiter in some cases, like when working with the low end like this, really helps to kind of just thicken out that sound and really bring up the power. So what I've done is I've just gain matched it here, so I brought down the gain on a utility plugin so we can A/B it. So this is before. So you'll also notice if you look at the meter as well, it's not jumping around as much. So we've really tamed that sound, just made it a bit thicker. And next I wanted to make sure that the low end was in mono, so we haven't got stereo subsignals, which we did have. And what I did was, instead of making the whole thing mono, I've just added in 138 Hertz crossover with the mono maker. So this is the Brainworks BX Control V2 plugin, and it allows you to mono certain parts of the signal or bring down the overall stereo width as well. So what I did was, 138 Hertz, we've made everything below there mono, so we haven't got any issues going on there. And I didn't want to go all the way up, so we've left the stereo width open, so the mid to high frequencies, we've got that kind of widespread going on with things like the reverb as well. So because we used a percussive loop, there was already a lot of stereo stuff going on there. Obviously we pitched it down, so we then take that stereo content and we've put it into the sub areas which we don't want. So this is a really good technique which I use on everything now, just to make sure that everything's mono compatible, especially on bass sounds as well. So we've got that set up, and then lastly I just wanted to add a touch more of the 200 Hertz just to balance out the overall tonal balance of the sound as well. So altogether we've got this. So yeah, that works really well for me. I really like where that's sitting. It adds a lot more depth and grit to the overall sound of what we've got going on, and also adds a lot more groove. It's really rolling now, I think. So there's a really easy way to create techno rumbles using percussive loops by pitching them down and adding some processing as well. And I feel like this is a really, really easy, quick way to make your own unique techno rumbles. And it's really, really fun to do. Different sound sources will obviously give you different results, and you can also experiment with the processing as well. These are processes that I tend to use in a lot of sound design sculpting sessions, but you can use your own plugins. You can experiment with different saturation and amplifier plugins, different reverbs. You can use completely different plugins altogether and experiment with like Ableton stock plugins and special effects. So next, I'd like to know, are you making your own techno rumbles? What techniques do you like to use to get the best results when trying to achieve this kind of sound? Please let us know in the comment section below, and I can't wait to check those out. My name's James Orvis. Thank you for watching. I will catch you next time.